Most Christian dating conversations fail before they even start. And this isn't because the people on both sides don't care. Men and women happen to be very different. So when they are dating, and the intent is to get all the way to marriage, they are actually preparing for very different outcomes. The majority of the time, both people start conversations with the very best intent. Men, Christian men, actually want marriage, as quietly as it's kept. And I think many people agree that the majority of single Christian women also want marriage. So if both sides want the same thing, it'd be pretty easy to assume that this whole Christian dating thing would be going a whole lot better than whatever else is happening in the culture. And it's not, because the messages that men receive about dating and the ones that women receive are generally competing narratives. And as a result, they're both optimizing for very different things along the way. All of that misalignment eventually creates confusion. And when that plays itself out long enough, eventually that turns into frustration on both sides. And when that keeps on going, the end result is you get silence. And that's even when both sides have the absolute best intent. To clarify, this is not a call-out video. It is not my intent to attack anybody involved in this situation. Not the men, not the women, and not even the church. But you really can't fix a problem if you first don't admit that you have one. And it's hard to admit it when you really don't understand where it's coming from and why. Because amongst Christian singles, men want marriage and women want marriage. So it's about time that we identify the glitch that seems to be keeping so many people from getting what they actually want. Dating at its core, specifically when you are focusing on getting marriage as the end goal, is always an exercise in optimization. All that really means is that, generally speaking, you're trying to give the right inputs to get the right output. If you play the dating game correctly, you should get the best possible outcome. And when you make mistakes along the way, the end result isn't exactly what you had hoped, even if you do get to marriage. And that's what most people are concerned about. They don't want to be in a bad marriage. So in the Christian dating world, if you are a man, your experience is really about managing risk exposure. Allow me to explain. The first immediate risk that men will have to guard against will be emotional, because in our society right now, there's not a whole lot of places where men can really express their emotions. In the context of dating, like getting to know a woman, you're going to have to open up. There's really no way around it, especially if you're going to get to marriage. The problem is, when you open up and you start sharing things about your past, and for that matter, even your hopes and dreams for your future, you don't know what this person is going to do with that information. And if the relationship fractures, they might use it against you. So men are trying to find women for whom they actually feel emotionally safe, which is a very big deal because they don't have a lot of other places to go that are non-romantic that still offer that. And this immediately leads into another risk that they have to manage, which is going to be their reputation. Because depending on whom you choose to date and how that plays out, in the context of a church culture, your reputation is on the line. Generally speaking, if you're in a close-knit church community, you can't really date around. It's really not set up like that. And there's a lot of pressure put on men to be hyper-intentional. What that means is when they choose a woman and try to pursue her, it almost feels like you have to get it right the first time. I'm not saying that this is the case all the time, but it is rare, unfortunately, to be in a church culture where men and women have a lot of organic opportunities to get to know each other as friends. And there's not a lot of pressure on you to have to be hyper-intentional out the gate. And even if you do get into a relationship and everybody has the best intent, where there's not a lot of sin issues on the table, when that relationship fractures, the general feeling is that if the man was intentional and it breaks down, some of the blame, perhaps disproportionately, might be put on him, even if nobody is really at fault. Long story short, a man's reputation in the church might be scrutinized a little bit more than perhaps that of a woman if a relationship breaks down. So once again, men are trying to guard against essentially being in failed relationships, because the breakup is not the only thing that they're risking. And when it comes to reputation and respect, men care a whole lot about that. And of course, the biggest risk of all is the long-term consequence of marrying the wrong person. Now, I say this with all due respect, but marriage is a binding contract if we're talking about legally as far as a covenant before God. And if a man chooses to marry a woman who, at the bare minimum, isn't exactly whom she presents herself to be, and now you are in a marriage, the Bible is very clear about this. If you just go to Proverbs 21:9, that it is better to live on the corner of a roof than it is to live in a house with a contentious wife. Just let that sink in for a moment. So if a man ends up choosing a wife who doesn't turn out to be faithful, she isn't respectful, and that's not just how she speaks to him, but also how she speaks about him. Among other things, his life just got incredibly complicated very fast. So in the case of a single Christian man, choosing a wife is always an incredibly high-risk endeavor. Don't get me wrong, finding a good wife is invaluable. That's the easiest word that I could give for it. But what men are experiencing while they're dating isn't fear, it's responsibility awareness. And if we put away all the romance movies for a moment and just be very honest about this, dating for most men isn't about excitement. It's about making sure that you don't make the wrong, irreversible choice. But I admit, there is a whole other side to this. Because when women go out and date, they are also optimizing for something entirely different. And they have good reason to. So everything that I'm about to say is to provide context, not criticism. And keep in mind that some of the language I'm about to use might sound similar, but it played itself out in very different ways. But if you're new here, I want to say thank you for even making it this far into the video. My name is Ezra, and if relationships that actually work are really what you want, I believe anybody can have it if you ask the right questions. Because if the Word of God is actually true, then I've got a whole lot of repenting to do. And if anything that I say actually connects with you, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe. But if I don't, just let me know in the comments section, because I try to read them all. Because at the core, women often experience dating as evaluation and safety. Allow me to explain. Emotional safety is very big for women. And that doesn't change in dating. Although women have a lot more places to express their emotions outside of a romantic relationship, if they do get in one, they want to be with a man for whom they do feel safe emotionally. That comes down to their feelings, specifically guarding those feelings more than anything else. That means that if she's going through something, anything for that matter, it's less about fixing the problem and more about addressing and guarding her feelings. If she feels seen, if she feels heard, if she feels valued, if she can sense empathy, all of these are things that she is drawn to. This also means that any experience that triggers negative emotion, like something that is said, even something that is well-meaning, something that a man might say that is intended to help with the problem, triggers negative emotion, it can make her feel unsafe. And because our culture treats women incredibly differently than it does men when it comes to their emotions, and how it validates them. This is actually something that's a lot harder for men to do than anybody cares to admit, because everything they've been taught about their emotions doesn't apply. They actually have to learn how to be very different in how they approach problems, situations. What does it mean to listen? And sometimes listen some more. It doesn't come naturally to men. It's definitely not rehearsed within the male world. They have to get outside of themselves in a dating experience normally in order to do this well. And if you are a Christian woman, the next thing that she will likely be evaluating will be spiritual alignment. This is not just whether or not a man claims to be a Christian or even attends church. For many, that might be, the base camp level. Like, this is where we start the negotiations. But after that, women have a specific standard of what they expect from that man in terms of the seriousness of his spiritual walk. Now, I'm not here to get into conversations about theology and the depth of what people believe on this passage or that one. I don't really think that's how women are evaluating it, but it does still come down to a feeling, a level of comfort with the spiritual direction this man is going. Because there's no specific standard that every single woman has agreed upon, from a male perspective, it does sometimes feel arbitrary in terms of what one woman is willing to accept versus what another woman might reject. This doesn't mean that every man has to be a pastor. For that matter, there are many women who don't want to be with a man who is in that type of a role. But spiritual alignment, whatever that means to this woman, that will be evaluated. But what the culture is a whole lot more clear about seems to be for a woman to evaluate a man's stability and readiness. Now, stability and readiness aren't exactly the same things. But when I said those words, I'm pretty sure that most people thought about financial concerns more than anything else. And yes, when it comes to marriage, there does seem to be an expectation that men will be financially situated in a way that can take care of himself, but also take care of a family. That standard does slide depending on what that woman is expecting. But at the averages and at the extremes, I do believe that women desire to find a man for whom, if they were to choose not to work, notice, I said that part, if they were to choose not to do it, they would feel as if they could in the context of their marriage, that finances would be situated if they took that option, whether that's to raise children or to pursue something else. And in many ways, readiness can relate to money, but it might also be emotional. Is this man in a place where he can commit, specifically to one woman? And that does relate to fidelity, because if a man has a track record of not being consistent in relationships, for that matter, he's been unfaithful in past relationships, even if that happened before he was serious in Christ, that is something the woman will consider. I admit that because this is not information that people get from the onset, these are the types of things that might break up a relationship later on in the dating. Because when you just look at somebody, you don't know this part yet. What dating feels like for most Christian women is trying to consistently answer the same questions over and over and over again with every man they meet. Is this man ready? Is this man serious? Can I trust the trajectory that he is on in life? And to clarify, all of these standards that I just went over, they are not unreasonable. All of them make sense. But where a woman gets her evaluation metric for them, that can come from different places. It often might come from past disappointments. It could even come from cultural messaging. But yes, much of it probably does come from church advice about discernment. So when women date, women are not trying to be difficult. They're just trying to make sure that they don't get stuck with the wrong future. And if you think about what I just said, and then think about what men are doing, so far, the deviation is actually not that significant, at least not yet, because the real misalignment isn't where men are trying to avoid making the wrong irreversible choice, or women getting stuck with the wrong future. All of that makes sense, but the wheels come off the tracks when you evaluate the most dominant narratives that get sent to Christian men and the ones that get sent to Christian women about how they should approach dating, because they don't match. Men keep hearing to step up, to take initiative, and to take the risk. That's the narrative that is more or less going to be sent to them about how to approach dating. And what the women keep hearing is to be cautious, to wait for clarity, and to protect your heart. This right here causes a collision course. And if you don't see it, allow me to spell it out for you. Men feel that they are being asked to risk more with less assurance, but women feel that they're being asked to trust without enough evidence. And how this practically plays itself out in the dating game is that men, generally speaking, will have to take initiative. They have to take the risk. That means they essentially have to choose a woman and be very serious about it in order to make any progress. However, women are being told to be cautious, to guard their hearts. So that means while this man is being intentional and putting himself out there, she's still very much so in an evaluation process because he has to jump before he knows if there's any place to land. Yet she's inclined to let him before she's even certain at all that she has any desire to put up a net to catch him. So what you end up with is a whole lot of misfires and a whole lot of broken hearts. Because if you talk to the men, a lot of the pain about Christian dating will start to fall into a similar category about getting seriously interested in a woman, attempting to put yourself out there, take initiative, and then feeling taken advantage of, perhaps even feeling led on. But ultimately, no real relationship formed, certainly not one that made it all the way to marriage. And for women, it feels like being pursued by men whom they believe aren't ready, men who aren't good enough or in the place that is acceptable for marriage. So it's almost like for them, their time is being wasted. So if you want to avoid being taken advantage of or having your time wasted, because that's the glitch that's generally going to keep happening, then you have to lean into the feeling that the risk is not worth it without the assurance, or that giving out trust without enough evidence also isn't worth it. When you lean into those feelings, both the man and the woman think they're being responsible about how they're going to handle this going forward, but they're also both responding to very different incentives. It does seem that where we've landed as a culture is that Christian men and Christian women receive very different messages about how to approach dating. And all of that is fine. I understand why they would be different messages, but that only works if the messages are complementary, because no relationship can function well if everybody is not rowing in the exact same direction. That's not even just a romantic point. That is something that applies to all relationships, including business partnerships. Everybody has to want the same end goal and pursue it, even when they bring different things to the table. Because in my last video, I did cover that what men want from women and what women want from men aren't exactly the same thing. But in general, they can still complement each other. But what definitely doesn't work is if one party is being told to take the risk and the other party is being told to be cautious. That doesn't align. It literally collides at this point. A lot of church dating advice is well-meaning, but unfortunately, it does make things a little bit worse because, incidentally, pastors may give out advice that becomes one-size-fits-all because the context of dating changes drastically depending on where you are in your age and stage of life. On a college campus, a lot of the stakes that people are evaluating don't really apply. Everybody's on the same campus. Yes, you have a major, but if you are in a dating relationship that might turn into marriage, you're at a point where money and how much money people have doesn't really apply yet. People have potential, but that potential doesn't really need to be realized yet. Not the way that people may evaluate it when you're in your 30s. And now that we've come to a place where the advice that we get has become gender isolated in a way that is no longer complementary. Where one is told to take initiative, to put themselves out there, and to take risks. And the other one is told to be cautious, to guard their heart, and for lack of a better term, hyper-filter. Once again, you end up at a sticking point where nothing really moves forward, at least for most people. As far as I can tell, men and women are rarely taught how the other side experiences dating. And when you don't understand how the other side keeps score, it's hard for you to actually have success and go out there and put points on the board. Hey, I apologize. It's the only analogy that came to mind immediately. The end result of this becomes some degree of what I like to call parallel preparation, where men are trying to prepare for marriage, women are often doing the same thing. They're moving like this, but it never actually converges. Because remember, if it's complementary, people eventually have to meet in the same place. And yes, eventually that place would have to be the altar. We often don't even share the same language, because take initiative and guard your heart both sound good by themselves, but they compete with one another. And as a result, what many people are experiencing, once again on both sides, is frustration. And the longer you stay single and hope to be married, but, deal with this whole thing we call dating, that frustration is generally going to go up, not down. Simply put, in this thing that we call Christian dating, we taught men and women how to prepare, but we did not teach them how to interpret each other. And we are now at a point in the culture where people are witnessing the symptoms of all of this misalignment on a regular basis. You have conversations that stall between men and women, but you also have attraction without momentum. And that can also happen on either side. And then, even if you do have mutual attraction, that mutual attraction often doesn't come with much clarity. And the end result is that people start to assume that the other side has bad motives when there are none. Remember, if a man is just trying to take initiative, he's trying to take a risk, he's putting himself out there, but a woman is trying to guard her heart and be cautious, all of those things can be happening in the context of mutual attraction, and still, the relationship doesn't get to the end goal. And when a relationship breaks down, it is very easy to blame the other person, but most dating frustrations aren't about bad people. It's really just about misread signals. So the real question after all of this isn't actually about who is right. It is about whether or not anyone is actually translating what is being communicated. Because when you have a church culture where Christian men say they can't find a good Christian woman to marry, and then women in the same church can say they can't find a good Christian man, you don't just have misalignment anymore. You have a problem. Because a whole lot can happen when expectations aren't spoken. The whole lot does happen when intentions are misread. But what actually does happen when no one teaches men and women how to talk about all of this? And to be clear, I definitely want to know which side of this felt more familiar to you, how men approach dating or how women do. If you actually made it all the way to the end of this video, I do have to admit that thank you doesn't do it justice anymore, because you are a real one. As far as if anything I said actually connects with you, I do invite you to comment. Just be honest, share your experiences. I do the best that I can to actually read them all. And if nothing else, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe.